gentlemen, we are back. Thank you so much for staying with us. The hashtag on X is Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya and at Ayub Abdikadir. We sampled the feedback. So quick response. Yes.
Just briefly, I was going to comment a little bit on the earlier issue that we were talking about in terms of what we need to do. You ask a very important question and say that as a politician, you are elected by the citizens.
Correct.
You go there to represent their interest. But then, ultimately, you become a voting machine because your coalition says you have to vote this way. Your citizens are saying, this is how we want to go. This is my take on it, and I want to call upon citizens of Kenya. Don't allow us politicians to mislead you. What is important is for you to take account of the way we are voting, the way we are behaving in Parliament, the way we are turning into voting machines instead of protecting your interest. So that tomorrow, don't elect us because of the little money that we come and give you, you know, gonya, or whatever. Elect us because of what we can be able to do to help you change your life. I want to see more money in the pockets of Kenyans. Okay? I want to see us being realistic. But today, you know what will happen? Already, there is this showmanship, whereby the Kenya Kwanza is showing as if the president and the deputy president are fighting. We are seeing, you know, scenes of the deputy president carrying a small empty bag to Mombasa on a plane. And then today, we are being told the president is going to Mount Kenya. So this is to sidetrack, so that people can try to go for sympathy and forget about the issues which are affecting Kenyans. I want to call upon Kenyans to look at this budget. You know, it is unrealistic, and I call upon my very, very good friend, who I have a lot of respect for, the Cabinet Secretary. Let us live within our means. There's no point of taxing Kenyans to a point where they cannot breathe. We are suffering. So the issue is this: those views that are being given out by Kenyans are true. It's a sample of what is happening down there. Kenyans are suffering. Yesterday I was in Kikuyu. I went to visit Kikuyu Dairy. When I went to see Kikuyu Dairy, it's a small organization struggling to be able, you know, a group of very innovative people. In fact, Kimani Ichung'wah's dad delivers milk in that dairy. But guess what? The Kenya Dairy Board is a thorn in their flesh on a daily basis. They cannot tell them, this is what we're giving you. They just want money from them. You know, a particular percentage of their sales. You know, you need to show what is the need for us to be able to continue doing that.
Okay.
So really what we need to do is that we need to listen more to the Kenyans. We need to look at our entire tax policy, make it predictable. We need to live within our means. You know, all these pending bills, people are dying. People are killing themselves because of pending bills. You know, you work, you go, people have been auctioned, their lands have been auctioned. When do we bring that discipline? In fact, and finally, my point is this: if any governor of the 47 of them can just say, this is my one thing that I'm going to do. I am going to fix healthcare. I am going to fix roads. And you stick to one thing, Kenyans will give you a second time and you can fix the next thing. Because the reality is that what has been devolved has not been fully devolved. The national government is still holding everything. If you look at agriculture as an example, agriculture is devolved. But guess what? The majority of the money is where? In the ministry. Look at health as an example. Health is devolved. But look at the budget of the health sector in itself in this country. And the Ministry of Health is only on policy. It is only on level 6 hospitals. But level 1 to 5 is on the county government. But they're getting peanuts. So the truth of the matter is this. When you see Treasury saying, pass this, without making any changes, they are crying because they know they have to pay bills. Okay? But what about the Kenyans? What are you making life easy for Kenyans? Are you supporting Kenyans? It is about time that we politicians, and I'm asking my brother here, because I told him the budget committee has interest. You know, when they go to counties and they give them a bridge or they give them this, is that bridge more important than food that goes into the pocket?
Okay, we'll talk about the budget making process and how key that committee is, Senator Olekina, and now that we have a member of the budget committee here. And then I come to you. And then we're talking about some of the contentious proposals.
Allow me also.
Yes, I'll give you the time, Dr. You'll respond. Allow me to also engage Anne and Wycliffe. One of the major contentious proposal is the revenue that Kuria Kimani, the chair of the committee, says, which is 58 billion, a target that they seek to raise from the motor vehicle circulation tax. But there are questions here, for example, in the, and I break it down into two, the aspect of the value. For example, you have one brand of a car that manufactures different types of cars, depending on the capacity of the engine and also the pricing element that comes with that, and then the enforceability of this proposed tax. Can you take us through it?
Right. Thank you so much, Ayub. Yeah. And maybe just before I get to that, just to give my 2-cent contribution on the feedback from the viewers, it is very, very clear that Kenyans have persevered through Finance Act 2023. And what our senator said is about issue of capital freight. You know, we cannot collect revenue if our economy is not stimulated. So the moment I lose capital, then I lose jobs and the like. So basically what you're saying is you're operating on an area that we might not collect as much taxes. We had a discussion with a few of these players, like in the digital market. You see, we are moving from what you call DST to SEPT tax, yeah? And when you look at it keenly, it's more about raising the tax rate from 1.5% to 6%. So basically when you have that discussion with the players in that space, you hear that likely they'll see how then the way they deliver the digital services to Kenya will not be taxed in Kenya. And there are many ways to do it. Remember that tax is a global issue. We have global tax policies, and they know them better. So likely, you may find the little coin we are collecting under 1.5% also flies away because they know what is out there from a global tax perspective. Then looking at the public participation, I would only ask, Kenyans have spent hours and hours analyzing this finance bill. Well, I'm told that people even stayed there overnight. I mean, late into the night, to make sure that they are heard. So when we come then to hear that it could just be a tick box exercise, it is not a good thing for the Kenyans. And what we're imploring is that can this be listened? Because it will happen that, yes, it goes through, but what will the manufacturers, the Kenyans do? They'll kick into survival modes. You find maybe they're not even paying any taxes, yeah? So very, very important. So to the issue of motor vehicle,
yes,
of course, the big question is, what kind of a tax is it? Is it on income? Is it a levy? I mean, a vehicle is a good, I've purchased it. Then you put it under the Income Tax Act, which is based on taxation of income earned, yeah? Mm-hmm. So this motor vehicle already, we are wondering, is it within the right legislation? Is it income tax or not, right? So that is a big, big question. Then number two is this value of the car. I mean, it keeps changing, right? Vehicles are the most depreciable assets. They go down within no time. So when you kick in a very high rate, yeah, then that means I'll pay a high rate when the car moves in, yeah? Then look at the impact to the insurance sector, all right? I would want them to give me a better value so that in case of any eventuality, I get a good compensation. But now here we have the motor vehicle tax, which is based on the value. Okay. What do you think the Kenyans will do? We are good Kenyans, yeah? We'll go only for the comprehensive party insurance, leaving that amount to a very low value so that we do not pay tax. Mm-hmm. What was the impact to the economy? Yeah, assume it happens that there are so many accidents along the way. How will people be compensated? Do you see how households be affected because of one thing, as in tax makes people to behave in a certain way to create more danger, even for the country, because if you have so many people who are on accidents, yeah, then you go to the hospital again, there's no medicine. Yeah. I mean, the labor hours, I mean, the hours I need to go to work, I cannot go to work. Can you see how negative it will impact us in terms of just a small issue, right? Then finally, still on the motor vehicle tax, the limits. So why do you want everyone to pay a 2.5 and put a cap? I mean, we have all ranges of cars. Small cars, big cars, I mean, big trucks. You see? Why do you want to limit? You all talk of a tax system that is progressive. You pay depending on your ability. But when you lock all of us into one room, someone is suffering in that bracket because we are using a tax rate and a capping. So you have to choose. Is it a cap for everyone? Or is it using the rates? So again, the system should be very, very clear. So as is, And again, looking at other issues of terms of exemptions,
Yeah.
Very few exemptions have been put forward from this motor vehicle, mainly the NIS, KDF, a few. Ambulances are left out, meaning even ambulances will pay motor vehicle. We have school buses, the yellow buses. They're all over. They're not in the exemption bracket. So is this being well thought out? I mean, this is an item that people need to go back to the drawing board. Look at the ripple effect, The cost of, I said this earlier, the cost of transportation affects everything. We're saying bread, we'll add VAT at 16%, right? Then after 16%, it will be transported to the kiosk through a motor vehicle. Again, that cycle. So it's like we are in a cycle that is never ending.
Yeah.
We take with one hand.
Yes.
We give the other hand, but it's a zero-sum game.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wycliffe, for example, if, say, Senator Ledama Ole Kina does not agree with the value of the value the insurance company is giving him, does it then mean that the insurance will not give him a cover? And who then resolves that dispute? Because the bill does not provide for a mechanism. And who then will talk about that dispute resolution mechanism? Does it not raise more complexities than the money they are targeting, which is 58 billion per the chair of the Finance Committee?
I think the whole assumption is that we have always valued our cars anyway. Insurance companies have always contracted valuers to value cars for them to give you a premium rate. So I do not think there is a problem with evaluation, but I think the bigger problem is now on affordability of all these tax, because we've had Kenyans being unable to actually pay insurance premiums. You get out there, you go to the market, you get rates of 5, 6, 7% for premiums. And I've seen Kenyans unable to actually pay those kind of premiums.
Okay.
They've even gone further to actually just pay third party, because third party you only pay maybe 7,500, you have your cover. So it's a big risk. Now we are telling Kenyans that you've been unable to pay 4% or 5% to be covered comprehensively. We are now telling you, upende usipende, you've got to pay 2.5%. So you take your third party cover, whatever you want, but then you've got to pay 2.5% of the value. But where we have a bigger problem on valuation is where you take a third-party cover. Because I think when your vehicle is older than 10 years, you can only take a third-party cover. So those kind of vehicles have not been valued, and there's no mechanism of valuing them. You only need to approach your insurance cover. This is my vehicle, get a cover. The rate is standard. So how are we then going to enforce that evaluation mechanism? I think that is now those items that are not covered, and I've tried to read the bill, it does not give a leeway. So this tells you that the whole idea, the whole tax is not well thought out. And if what I saw on the presentations to the Finance Committee, Kenyans are actually saying, get this tax out. And to me, this will be a very big test to see whether Mheshimiwa, my colleague in the profession, Kuria, actually follows what he said, that we have listened to Kenyans, we are going to take and factor this in. This, I think, is one tax that we are all waiting to just see. But we also remember what he promised us last year on the housing levy, because again, that was the same thing where Kenyans said, you know what, this whole thing doesn't make sense, we do not want it. So we are keen to see what happens on this motor.
And is it not then an irony, because it's being proposed for introduction while we have the petroleum levy at the moment, because back in the day we had the motor vehicle license, it was replaced by the fuel levy, meant to upscale our revenues. And then there is now the proposed introduction of this 2.5% motor vehicle circulation tax. Isn't this a double taxation?
It is big time, because yes, there's the petroleum development levy, there is the fuel levy, all those levies, because if you look at fuel, there are about 6 components of levies in there, which is all geared towards collecting money from motor vehicles, because again, the only people who spend on fuel, on petrol, on diesel are people with motor vehicles. So we are again now saying over and above what you're paying, we're collecting this more. But this particular one may end up even then ensuring that the fuel levy is what is being collected goes down, because people are going to say, you know what, maybe I do not need a car. But then how do we move from one place to another? But another good aspect on this is that we may now see Kenyans saying, you know what, I will risk. I will not insure my car. Because the only way to collect this tax is when you're taking out your premium. So somebody is likely to say, you know what, let me just walk without a car. And so we've got to look at the danger that we are putting Kenyans into. Yeah,
and Senator, does it not by extension then have this ripple effect of since... yes, okay. He had a point. And, a response towards the...
Let him respond to that and then I'll come back.
I'll pick up on it.
I'll come back.
Yeah, I've been unfair for me.
What's your answer?
I think, Ayub, I've listened to the views of Kenyans. And, you know, I want to remind Kenyans that about 3 days ago, is it 3 or 4 days?
Yeah.
A survey was done by InfoTrack. And the survey was saying that 83% of Kenyans are saying no to this finance bill 2024. Any smart politician would be committed suicide by voting yes. And I do believe I'm a smart politician. That's why I've been there 3 times. So I want to confirm to Kenyans, as it is today, if that bill gets to the House, as it is today, I'll be voting no. But let's also not close the room, because Kenyans have gone out there. They have given their input into the bill. And areas where they have concerns in terms of manufacturers, personal level. Last year, they gave a lot of comments. They were not factored into the amendments. This year, the chair has assured Kenyans that I will factor in your comments through public participation.
They did the same last year.
That's what I'm saying. Last year, they were not taken. But assuming all the comments which have been given, and I've actually been following. I'm above my budget, but I've been following the comments. And I want to single out the presentation by Kenya Association of Manufacturers and presentation by Kenya Breweries. And I think presentation by the oil manufacturers, the cooking oil manufacturers. And I'm a scholar. I want to confirm to Kenyans I'm a scholar. I'm an economist by training. Were very solid. Very solid. And you have heard my colleagues talk about ripple effects and all that. So, assuming all these recommendations were factored into the bill, and Parliament is presented with a bill which had taken care of all this, assuming this time there's a turnaround and the Kimani-Kuria committee factors in 100% all the comments. And because as we are talking, the bill has also some good things. Let's not, you know, we have focused so much on the bad side. For example, those who save for pension, there has been an increase. The experts can tell you. We have increased the bracket so that instead of 240, I think they have been pushed to 360.
Yes.
That's a good proposal. So we are saying, assuming the negatives are sorted out, and we have positives for Kenya, and as an economist, would you expect me to vote no? If we bring an environment where we are going to encourage more manufacturers to come to Kenya because the taxation regime has improved, we are going to make sure that Kenyans have more disposable income through the bill. So let's Kenyans also not close their eyes and say that even as now we're sure nothing will change.
Unamended.
And Parliament.
Unamended. Parliament. So at the moment you...
Unamended is a no.
Okay.
Amendments, if they factor in the issues, and that's the work of Parliament. We are there to amend laws and improve. So you can't say the Parliament will just be voting no because the bill as it is now. This is a proposal, it's not an act.
Okay.
It's a proposal.
Which will come before
It can be amended 100 times. So if we are allowed, even me, I will be moving some amendments, serious ones. If my amendments are taken in and I'm convinced now my amendments are in and things are better, I'll be voting yes.
Okay, and that is only if your amendments
are taken in.
Are also in tandem.
In tandem with the Kenyan manufacturers, the cooking of oil factories, the breweries.
And more than 80% of Kenyans, so according to that, a poll said that the current bill in its form is bad for us.
In its form.
Yeah.
But the bill can be amended.
Yeah, so you have your amendment as the lawmaker representing Kitui Central constituency.
Yes.
Also have the overall responsibility of also having representing the Kenyan people by extension, of course, through oversight and legislation.
You know, that's why I'm in the National Assembly.
Yeah.
National Assembly, we don't lock ourselves into those cocoons constituencies.
Yeah.
We make laws for the nation.
Correct.
It's not like... and then as I conclude, the issue of the human beings, and I like what the expert has said. You know, human beings are rational. Human beings are rational. That means... you can easily change your way of operation by just changing taxation regime. So people don't be surprised. That's why we are talking about people are changing their business models because they are rational. I'm an investor. I see things are not working for me. I either switch to Uganda or I change my business model. Human being, you are meant to things like fuel is so expensive now, I can't afford fuel. I jump to a public means. So fuel consumption reduces immediately. You don't collect as much tax as you expected because now you'll be using public means. Okay. And other Kenyans have decided to walk.
Okay.
I hate to say this, but this is my very good friend. But on a lighter note, what's green on the outside and red on the inside? Now, the issue here is this. Can we talk for Kenyans? Because my brother has said something which, and I really want to demystify it. He has listened to the manufacturers. He has listened to... Have we listened to the Kenyans?
Yes.
You know, because the manufacturers are business interests. They are taking care of their own interest. They want to be able to pay, less taxes for them to be able to grow their own income. Can we be as specific as to a Kenyan who is making 50,000 shillings? There are suggestions that currently, if the finance bill passes and is ascended into an act of parliament or into law, the government alone will take, from the 50,000 shillings, the government alone will take 21,000 shillings. You will be left with 29,000 shillings. That means the only thing you can be able to eat is ugali, 24/7. Because your rent will take between 10 to 15,000 shillings out of the little 29,000 you're left with. You know, your transport from home to work will take another 3,000 or 4,000 shillings. Okay? Then your electricity, your water, come on. You will only be left, the only thing you can afford is unga, ugali. And we are, all of us are coming into Nairobi, building Nairobi. If we were living in our homes, in our rural homes, we'll have small little farms where we can grow our vegetables, we can grow other things, and then there'll be tax, of course, on those vegetables. But we can still survive that way. The reality is this, Kenyans are suffering. I don't care about manufacturers. They can provide all their presentations and everything, but if the manufacturers are not also concerned about the Kenyans who are being employed by them, it bothers me. I care about the manufacturers when they care. If, let's say, for instance, if today the manufacturer comes and say, I want to be able to pay my employees 100,000 shillings or 60,000 shillings, because the government is already overtaxing them, so please reduce my taxes so that I can increase disposable income to the Kenyans, I'll be able to do that.
All right.
So really, the issue here is this, and I want to end by saying this. As lawmakers, we must think of unintended consequences when we pass these legislations. Because here's what will happen. Kenyans will decide, you want to tax my car, I'll park it on the road. Kenyans can decide, we are sabotaging this economy because you're making it difficult for us to live. What would happen, hypothetically, if all Kenyans decide, you know what, let me just park this car on the road one day to protest? It is not something which is organized by the opposition. It is something that Kenyans themselves will say, we are sick and tired of these, tax policies which are unpredictable. We will follow what those people who are leaving the country are doing. We will now stop everything here so that you can collect those cars and make money out of them. We need to to reduce our taxes. We need to consider the poor people who are suffering, who are not making any money. Because if we do not do that, And if we don't think of the unintended consequences, right now we're just thinking of, you know, some other consequences which we know people will suffer.
Yeah.
This finance bill will make Kenyans poorer. There'll be more poor Kenyans than ever in history.
Thank you. Let's now cross over to my colleague Safin, because after the breakdown she's going to be giving us within Wycliffe and Dr. Makali and Senator Ledama Olekina take a look at the fiscal discipline needed. In that regard, we talked about the revenue-raising measures, we talked about the budget estimates, and now coming to the accountability part and what some of the key stakeholders are saying, especially constitutional office holders, in regard to that very specific topic of accountability, because the money that we fetch from the Kenyan people must be accounted for. And it's worth noting that Kenyans have been the constant factor in this equation. All the others have been variables. We have had different regimes and leaders, but Kenyans have been paying taxes since we gained independence, and there's the question of accountability and where the money is spent. Well, we'll be crossing over to my colleague Safin, who is on standby at the Super Bowl to give us further breakdown of the allocations per sector done by the government, and we'll be crossing to her shortly. But we proceed. Let me come to you first, Dr. Makali Mulo, because this is very pertinent. And these are the submissions by the Controller of Budget when she appeared before the National Dialogue Committee at the Bomas of Kenya on increased taxation, unrealistic budget, the revenue estimates, and the lack of foreign direct investment. For example, the Controller of Budget said, while looking into the budget for the Consolidated Fund Services, the source of her salary, and other constitutional office holders, she established that her annual salary had been budgeted at 3 times her actual earnings, a discrepancy extended to all state officials, she said. I am the only state officer in my situation. There's nothing like confusion there. That's when she sought answer as to why her salary was tripled. Clearly, there is corruption here, is it? And malfeasance, evidently, in the budget-making process. How can this be tamed, even as we look at ambitious tax-raising measures, and notwithstanding the cries by Kenyans, sealing these loopholes once and for all, and focus on now proper management of the public coffers?
Yeah, a good question. Actually, the issue of the consolidated fund expenditures, things we have been discussing, actually they fall under the committee where I'm the vice chair. And what happens is, as you rightly put it, even when you look at the component on pensions, for example, you'll be surprised, Ayub, to discover that over the years, we have been paying pension to some people in the UK who left this country in 1963 after we took over independence, so that they allow room for Africans to take over. And we've been paying that. Initially, we used to budget 100 million. So when our committee looked at those figures, we said we wanted to know exactly who's being paid. Can you imagine that has reduced from over 100 million? Now we are budgeting for about 40 million. So as you rightly put it, the figures, and that's what we were saying. To me, I think if we spend as much energy as we are spending in the finance bill on the expenditure items, we would actually be able to sort most of our problems. We would not even be talking about this finance bill. The other day I was just telling people, this finance bill goes to collect 302.
Yeah.
If you look at the Outer General's report, corruption alone is taking a third of the budget, which is over $1 trillion. So if you sealed the loopholes, a third of that, you have enough money for the finance bill. And you'll be able to shape it and say, for this year, we are not going to collect any money through finance bill, because finance bill is an annual bill. So that we say, this year we are not collecting, we just seal the loopholes, Kenyans pay the taxes you have been paying, and we move on. But I think what you are saying is, let's just be more keen in terms of what goes into our budget, in terms of figures. And I agree with the controller. You know, it was easy. I'm the only person in the office. I know my salary, I know my allowances. Yeah. Why do you give me twice a budget of twice my entitlement? And I think these are the issues.
Yeah, but when she, Dr. Makali, flags out such a concern,
yes,
which is a red flag in the view of many Kenyans, and the budgeting cycle has generally 4 key phases, and you sit at a very critical committee, which is the budget committee of the National Assembly. There is the formulation stage, there is the adoption stage, there is the execution stage, and there's a control stage. It's not the ordinary folk who here is saying that, look, money is being stolen.
Yes.
That's what she told the Kenyan people.
It's
the control of budget. And Parliament is constitutionally mandated, even to the extent of giving the constitutionally guaranteed power to amend the budget itself,
yeah, sure.
which Katiba gives you. How does this then escape suddenly the radar of the National Assembly?
No, you'll be surprised what has happened. Through the advice of the bodies my friend is mentioning, we moved from itemized budget to program budgeting.
Yeah.
Program budgeting means you don't get to the nitty-gritty details of the budget as a house. You get the program, and then you approve the program. The nitty-gritty remains in the big book, which is on the other side of the executive. So that denies Parliament the heart of, we have a very serious parliamentary budget office, but it denies now Parliament as a house the required scrutiny in terms of the details. And I think that's the question. Do we go back to itemized budget? Do we remain program? Each one of there are merits and demerits of each side. But I think what we are saying is maybe before even these things come to Parliament, it would be important then for our parliamentary budget office to get that big book and isolate those cases which appear to be suspicious. And otherwise, as Parliament...
The isolation was done, Dr. because the Office of the Parliamentary Budget Office said this has... the cost of living has contributed to the high cost of imports, contributed to it, including fuel and food, and affected the stability of import-oriented businesses. It has also led to high levels of unemployment and loss of livelihood. That's according to the Parliamentary Budget Office Director, Dr. Martin Masinde. The income problem, the limiting purchasing power.
But those are still very general statements. Yeah. How I wish you, like, for example, I wish you went to Office of the President. And item by item, we look at it and say, does this make sense? Does this make sense? Is this adding value to Kenya's welfare? All those things.
Okay, he points out, he picks out, for example, there's urgent need for tax reforms, he continued, in this country. Increased taxation may lead to potential adverse economic effects. There's an optional tax rate that maximizes government revenue. Increasing tax rates beyond this point may reduce tax revenue because high taxes can discourage economic activity, worsening the already cash-strapped position. The economic activity is so hostile, he said, so even the head of state goes out and gets investors into the country, they will come and explain and go back because of the economic situation, which is not good for their investment. Clearly, these are all the telltale signs that serious officers have pointed out. The Parliamentary Budget Office, the controller of budget. But again, Parliament, which is so influential, it's either you are not heeding this or you are ignoring these advices.
No, what we normally do in Parliament is once a report like that is tabled, because that's a report of part of our report, the report will be approved by Parliament. The implementation bit is left to the implementation committee. So I'm telling you the challenge. There's a gap between what Parliament approves as recommendations and the implementation. And as I said, at the end of the day, we have three arms of the government. So who is supposed to implement this? It's the executive procedurally, because they are the people who originate the budget originally. Parliament actually comes at the budget process making at around February when you get the budget policy statement. By that time, a lot of other things have been done. But all said and done, I think we have been just told, Ayub, can we be more careful where we are applying our resources?
Okay, so living within our means, generally. And coming to you then, the aspect of the fiscal discipline that dovetails the aspect of now living within our means, and is that happening? Is it a reality? Because President William Ruto has been very consistent on the aspect of austerity. But you look at the expenditure by his executive office, especially foreign travels, and you see there is a sudden upsurge in the money spent on both domestic and foreign travels, and also at the ministries, departments, and state agencies. I mean, what's the point then? On one hand, you are taking it from Paul and giving it to Peter. It seems not working out, and a flat-out zero-sum rate.
Correct, Ayub. And looking at it from a perspective of what it is about consolidation, we're trying to make sure we correct the right revenue and also manage our expenditure. But from the discussion, you can hear that we're focusing more on expenditure, not looking at the revenue. So definitely, what will that lead to? We expect a very high, maybe high deficit. We have a deficit right now which is estimated around 500 billion, But it's likely that if we do not collect the projected revenue, this will widen up. when you have the deficit, where does the government look into? Mainly it goes to issues of borrowing, which can either be local or external. From a local borrowing perspective, that automatically now affects our SMEs and businesses because they're not able to borrow the loans from the banks. You find banks, actually, they are the major shareholders in terms of the various bills that have been released. Okay. Then you see, again, if you have to borrow from outside, then we have the issues of forex implication to our country in terms of paying back the interest, which is very, very high. Then looking at that aspect, you see that we need to relook at the way we budget. And of course, as said, we should not budget for non-accountability because we should be sure that I'm going to buy sugar, bread, and onions. And I know the estimate within a good range, but I cannot triple that, just to have it on the paper. So it's very, very, very important to make sure that we have the numbers that portrays the reality. And then don't forget, on the other hand, where is this revenue? We spoke about the issue of investors, by and large, and especially the foreign direct investment. And tax is a key factor in terms of if an investor wants to come into the country. In the last 2 years, you note that we have 2 items within the tax laws that are not for foreign investors. We have the issue of interest deduction. You find that if you are a foreign investor, you come invest through loans from your shareholders who are majorly non-resident, you're not allowed to deduct that interest expense as part of the expense.
All right.
And then, just to add on to that, we have the issue of foreign exchange losses. Last year was a bad year for our country in terms of the fluctuations. So you find most businesses reported high forex losses. But as per the tax law is right now, you cannot be able to claim that forex if mainly you are debt, rather you're financed by debts. And again, you're saying this period, if you have to claim it, you can only claim it within 3 years. So again, you're not looking at the aspect of the payback period. So saying in a nutshell, this equation is not easy. Revenue here, expense here. How do I get my revenue? I said earlier, we can only correct revenue if our economy is stimulated. Who will stimulate our economy is through proper priorities in terms of where we're taking the money. I'm seeing the finance bill, we have issues of trying to have importers of eggs, onions, things that we can produce here, right? So you wonder, why can't we just go to agriculture? I mean, we have so much farm around here, which if it's well given incentives, we will cut on the importation cost, which goes again to our expenditure. So it's a whole discussion because it's not one item. Revenue is large, expenditure is large,
Wycliffe and Senator, I'll come to you shortly. For now, I'll cross over to my colleague Safin standing by on the Super Bowl to give us further breakdown of the allocations per sector. Some key as listed in the President's the plan, which was his manifesto launched before the campaigns on the 30th of June 2022. And over to you, Safin.
All right, thank you so much, Ayub Abdikadir. We are actually going to be looking at some of the figures that have been allocated to the various sectors in the financial year 2024-2025 budget. And I had already taken you through how we are noticing a trend of an increment in the budget over the years. Actually, that 4 trillion figure that you're seeing right there is the highest since Kenya got independence. It is 250 billion shillings higher than what we recorded in the previous financial year of 2023-2024. And you can see the trend that has been depicted there. Questions that have been asked is whether we are living within our means. And of course, those are some of the issues that our panel has been discussing this particular morning. But then again, I just want to take you through the sector allocations. I'd already shown you what the education sector, which is amongst the sectors that have gotten a huge allocation in this year's budget. You can see there more than 600 billion shillings for basic education, university, and even technical and vocational training there. But a key interest is what has been given to the Teacher Service Commission, 351 billion shillings. This is for teacher resource management. Actually, TSC is supposed to be employing about 26,000 junior secondary school teachers. You remember how that issue has been controversial. Teachers who have been on internship, an issue that has also also been taken to the corridors of justice. But now TSC is expected to, in the next financial year, which begins in July 1st, to be able to employ teachers of JSS under the permanent and pensionable terms. We also have about 20,000 teachers who are going to be employed to address the deficit that we are currently facing. Of course, among other expenditures touching on free day secondary school, the junior secondary school, and of course scholarships and loans for institutions of higher learning. On the health sector, of course, an allocation to the medical services, State Department of Medical Services getting 102 billion shillings, public health getting 28 billion shillings, a sector that has also been key as it was one of the campaign promises that President William Ruto gave Kenyans. We have seen a lot that has happened in this sector, including just the recent stockouts of, for instance, vaccines for children, drugs such as TB. We have seen also concerns from doctors who went on strike for almost actually 100 days compared to the previous strikes that we experienced in the country. So those are some of the issues that in this year's financial year budget, probably an allocation has been placed to address. Of course, it's taking you through other sectors that have received huge amounts of money. Roads there receiving 100 billion shillings. Energy receiving 69 billion shillings to go into issues like rural electrification program, purchase of new transformers, among others. The war against corruption in the country getting an allocation of 4 billion shillings. The Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions as well, the similar allocation of 4 billion shillings. IEBC also getting an allocation there of 4 billion shillings. We're looking at the Ministry of Agriculture, another very key component of President William Ruto's agenda, getting 79.8 billion shillings. One of the biggest promises was how to see how the country can cut on imports, and of course also to address the issues of food security and also to subsidize production. We have seen the government issuing subsidized fertilizers, part of the interventions to subsidize production as their strategy, the Kenya Kwanza government, to address the issue of food insecurity in the country. We have on the security sector an allocation of over 110 billion shillings for the National Police Service, Department of Defense, 173 billion shillings there in the financial year 2024-2025. But an interesting allocation that I was also already elicited debate is the allocation on the executive. This is actually the second budget that is being delivered under President William Ruto's administration. Remember, one of the key promises was that he was going to cut down on expenditure and unnecessary cost, and his office has gotten an allocation of 5.1 billion shillings. And of course, this is actually an increment from what this office got in the previous financial year, which was 4.3 billion shillings. If you look at the Office of the Deputy President, an allocation of 4.8 billion shillings, still an increment from what this particular office got in the previous financial year, which was 3.7 billion shillings. Another allocation in the Office of the Prime Cabinet Secretary, Musalia Mudavadi, getting 1.1 billion shillings, and State House Affairs getting 9.4 billion shillings. The reason why this is a key interest area is because the executive seems to be getting the lion's share of the budget, which is a cumulative allocation of 2.39 trillion shillings. And generally, this is an increase from what was allocated to the executive in the previous financial year, which was 2.1 trillion shillings. So these are some of the areas that we have been able to identify. But just before I hand you over back to Ayub, we're also looking at the issue of the debt situation. And as at January 1st, 2024, this is how we were looking like as a country in terms of our debt situation. And it was actually amounting to 10.4 trillion shillings, which is more than half of the country's GDP, 64.6%. So the domestic debt accumulated to 50.4%, external debt 49.6%. But an interesting thing is also looking at our debt repayment strategy. energy, how it has been increasing over time, and we should actually be thinking about whether we are getting it right as a country. In the financial year 2023-2024, it stood at 1.62 trillion. But we are seeing that in the next financial year, which is beginning in less than 2 weeks, that is in July 1st, actually, we are going to be servicing our debt at a rate of 1.85 trillion shillings, an increment of about 14%. So you can look at that as well. Just one final thing here is to look at how public debt and the county equitable share allocations, how we have been faring when it comes to that. You can see we seems to be increasing our appetite for servicing debt and reducing what we are sort of like allocating in terms of development. You can look at the county's allocation percentage of the ordinary revenue. It has been declining over the years. From the financial year 2017-2018, it was 22%, but in the last financial year, which was 2023-2024, it had declined to 15%. Of course, there were variants in between the financial years that were in between there. But if you look at the debt allocation percentage of ordinary revenue, we are taking sort of like the opposite trajectory. For the financial year 2017-2018, it was 34%. But then in the last financial year, which was 2023-2024, it increased to 49%. So sort of like raising the question, where are our priorities and what are we doing to manage the debt crisis in the country? Seems like we increase the budgetary allocation for servicing debt as we reduce the allocation for what should be important for Kenyans. But that is just part of what we have. We also want to hear your thoughts on the allocations for the different sectors that have been allocated money for the financial year 2024-2025. What do you think? Plus, we had also asked you to weigh in on an area or a sector that you feel should be prioritized in the financial year 2024-2025 budget. That was our question, and we will be sampling feedback as we continue to have this conversation in studio. But for now, allow me to hand you over back to Ayub. Ayub?
Thanks, Afin. We'll be back to you shortly for the final feedback from our viewers on the SMS code and also the hashtag Daybreak on X. Wycliffe, I was on you, and this is largely around the area of, I'll come to you, on public expenditure. And given the first 9 months of the current financial year, the control of budget also points out lack of adherence to the government's own guidelines on foreign travels and the austerity measures that the head of state had announced. Talking about non-compliance in terms of non-submission of data, 35 ministries, departments and agencies did not submit their foreign travel as requested by the Control of Budget's office, Dr. Margaret Nyakango. Data discrepancies among the MDAs that submitted data. Several discrepancies were noted, indicating inconsistencies and potential inaccuracies in reported information. She recommends strict adherence to these guidelines. I mean, what's the point of formulating them, yet you don't adhere to them? Isn't this an area that can be looked into even as we look to the economic prosperity that we all aspire towards?
Ayub, I strongly believe that that is exactly our problem as a country. And unfortunately, when all these issues are pointed out, because there's a reason why the drafters of our constitution clearly said we must have a control of budget and stipulated her work or the work of that office. Unfortunately, we do not listen. She will issue a report like this, then she will recommend that strict adherence to the guidelines given. But then the question is, what happens after that? Because over and over, we've seen these concerns being raised. We've seen that office saying, this and this has not been followed, this has not worked as it should work. But then that story ends there. My feeling is that if we were going to be very serious about the affairs that we do, if we are going to follow this and say, you know what, let's listen to the control of budget, let's take steps. And even as earlier we were saying, we need to reduce our expenditure. That is a starting point. That let's look at the reports given by the control of budget and also the Auditor General. When we look into this, it gives us a leeway to actually go back and say, let's use this to implement discipline, let's have discipline, and then now let's go further and reduce our expenditure. So that we now avoid a situation where we're saying, you know what, there's no adherence to this, and that because this is exactly how we are encouraging wastage.
Okay.
And our biggest problem, even as we say that our expenditure, our budget has been growing up, it is because we've had, over the years, we've had wastage in that expenditure.
All right. Senator Ledama Olekina, yes, please.
Let me begin by saying, I think what we are responding to is what do we need to do to be able to inculcate the culture of fiscal discipline in all our two levels of government. Number one, before I even comment on these different allocations, my colleague, the Honorable
Dr.
Makali, said one thing which is very, very important. It's about time that we now rethink whether this program-based budget versus a line item budget, which one of the two helps us? Because a program-based budget, there are a lot of things which can be said there. And you will see that when you go to county governments and you try to dissect their budgets, they put a bunch of programs that we had a program of this, but they can't really account for it. So it's important for us now to rethink. With the limited resources that we have got to go into a line item budget. Mm-hmm. So if you have a budget, if it's executive budget, we need to itemize. And we need to be open, for oversight. Because that's the only time that the control of budget or the Auditor General report would be able to be meaningful. Number two, we need to come up with an end-to-end IFMIS system. And this is where the problem comes in. When a county government procures a particular service from supplier A or supplier B, the head of Treasury, according to the PFM Act Section 103 and up to 104, is a CC in charge of finance. But there are levels of approvals, which is approval 1 and approval 2, whereby when money is being requisitioned from the control of budget under Article 228, subsection 5 and 6, when the money comes out, the control of budgets looks at the budget which had been uploaded into the system. Those budgets are completely unrealistic. When she looks at that, when the money comes out of the control of budget, when she issues a check and the exchequer now releases the money to the county government, there is a lot of diversion. Okay. So to cure the diversion and to be able to inculcate fiscal discipline where we can show a balance between the revenue and the expenditures, what we need to do is to make sure that from the beginning of the procurement process, the service which is being procured, the company which is supplying the procurement services, there's an end-to-end, such that there's no human control again to say, I'm diverting this money that I'm getting, which is being released to me, it is now going to pay so-and-so, instead of paying the person who it's supposed to pay. That will help us reduce on our pending bills. Number two, it is also important for us to be realistic. We've looked at the budget for 2024-2025. And the figures which have been put out there are really shocking to me. Because if you find that the executive alone is getting an allocation equivalent to the shareable revenue of Nairobi County, 20.4 billion shillings. The shareable revenue for Nairobi County as an entire county is 20.4 billion. They collect about 12 billion, so that's 34 billion. But if you look at what has been given to the president, it's 5.1 billion. If you add the deputy president 4.8 billion, if you add Musalia Mudavadi 1.1 billion, you add State House affairs, that all totals to 20.4 billion. That is unsustainable.
Thank you.
That is unrealistic. Let me finish. So I think it's important that for us to be able to have fiscal discipline, the only way that oversight bodies can be able to work is also, number one, is to empower the Senate fully, and to ensure that judiciary plays a role. Because if judiciary plays a critical role here in ensuring, that there is prudence in the utilization of funds, that whenever there is a matter that is affecting a county, if the court, like for instance, and this is my last point on this one, we've got a governor of Isiolo, as an example. He's summoned to appear before the Senate. And then he goes out to marketplaces and says, I will never appear before the Senate. And then the next day, when the Senate now, through the law, if you read Article 125 of the Constitution, the Senate has got the same powers as the High Court. Number two, if you go to our parliamentary powers and privileges, Section 19, there are consequences when a witness fails to appear. So if we proceed and we go by the law, then that governor rushed to a Meru court. When he goes to Meru court, there are orders issued against another constitutional body that has been set to supervise. So really, the only way we can get fiscal discipline is to allow people to work together. You know, the judiciary, parliament, and the executive must all work together. Otherwise, EACC will not be doing their job. And I want to congratulate EACC today for what they did in arresting those officials at Vihiga. Go on arresting many. There are many from all the different counties who are embezzling county funds.
And you ended on a good note, notifying us of how the quasi-judicial aspect of how the House conducts its business. And you have heaped praise on the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission.
No, I just said good for what they did today.
Okay.
I've not heaped, no. Yeah. I said good for what they did today. We need to see more.
Okay.
Yes.
But you are part of the 25 senators who defeated the Conflict of Interest Bill.
Actually, let's get into the Conflict of Interest Bill. And I'm happy that you've raised that issue, because I'm the one who brought up the amendments. The problem is in our country is that when we have a legislation that we are not the ones legislators who are drafting it, that is an IMF legislation that was brought to us for us to pass it. We already have the same provisions in the Integrity Act. We have it in all the Ethics and Corruption Act. All those provisions that we amended, they are already in existing legislations. So what's the point of duplications? What's the point of a duplication? You need to read the act, the bill, the way it was proposed, and to see, you compare apples to apples with what you call it, with with the amendments that we brought in. And one amendment is this, because you brought up that issue.
But I'll read the amendments to you, because I have the Hansard here with me of submissions before the Senate, and as we finish up, because this was seen largely as the possibility of letting of corrupt state officials, and this is contrary to Article 79 of our Constitution, which provides for the establishment of the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission for such responsibilities. In your submissions, the Hansard of the Senate says, and this is to you, Madam Chairperson, I beg to move that Clause 5 of the bill be amended by renumbering the existing clause as subclause, deleting the words of the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, appearing immediately after the words as reporting authorities, and inserting the following new subclause immediately after existing subclause. A reporting authority shall, for the purpose of subsection, oversee the management of the conflict of interest for all public officers it's responsible for, promote best practices for the management of conflict of interest, and conduct awareness campaign in management of conflict of interest. You had, in most part of these shows, talked about accountability and the cost of corruption. But you are largely seen as
let me tell you, you know, the problem of not even defeated. I'm the one who brought in the amendments. So you should ask me. The problem of judging a book by its cover, open the legislation and read. There are very many reporting agencies. You know, why do you then cripple all of them and you put them all into EACC? You know, if it is an issue of conflict, let me ask you, have you ever, you've got relatives, you've got sisters.
Very many.
You know, very many of them. Hypothetically, this is my brother and this is my sister. I'm a politician. You know, I'm doing my own business. That conflict of interest bill, as proposed, was saying that my sister there cannot work with the government. Does it mean that the fact that she's now my sister, you know, punishes her for me being elected? Read the entire act. Don't read a section which is sponsored by EACC for an article on the Standard newspaper, because if you read that article and precisely the point that you read, it is only with EACC. Read the entire amendments that we drafted. And
I read what you moved.
I moved all of them, not one.
There are very many.
I'm the one who moved all of them.
The marginal note by deleting words of commission appearing immediately. That's what you proposed.
Exactly. Commission. Yeah. So that article, it's not quantum physics.
This is the
was sponsored by EACC.
Okay. So I'm holding you to account by your submissions before the Senate.
Yes. And it is because it was repetitive. Okay. It was repetitive. Whatever was being brought to that conflict of interest bill is already provided for by other legislations that exist.
Thank you, Senator. It was a note of accountability. I'll shortly be crossing over to Safin for the feedback, and I understand that we are out of time, so we'll be leaving it at that. Many thanks for your time, lady and gentlemen. Much appreciated for your time, for coming on board this morning and talk to us about this very pertinent matter ahead of the presentation that will be made at the National Assembly by the National Treasury Cabinet Secretary, Professor Njuguna Ndongo. Thanks for your time. And Mangondo, Senior Tax Manager, Tax EY, your time is appreciated. CPA Wycliffe Bichanga, ICK Council Member, your time is equally appreciated. Dr. Makali Mulu, MP Kitui Central and Member of the Budget Committee, thank you for your time. Senator Ledama Olakina, Narok County Senator, and the Senate Minority Whip, your time is all appreciated, all about bettering our governance space. Over to you, Safin.
All right, thank you, Ayub, and thank you who has been watching us from home since we began this broadcast till now. And thank you, too, for them that took time to share with us your thoughts on social media. And we really appreciate what you have done, just setting time for us. We have just begun the coverage of the reading of the budget 2024-2025. So make sure that you keep it Citizen Television. There's a lot that we have lined up for you. We will follow this whole process until the tail end of it for you. So do stay with us. Enjoy the rest of your viewing. My name is Safina Chengoma. Have a lovely day ahead.